And we can ask whether there's any philosophical problems with any of that, and if so, how they might be resolved. So just a few things to get us back into this. Again, let's put our working definition of free will on the board. And we're really characterizing free will in terms of agency, and here's how we're defining agency. Directing one's body and or thoughts through one's choices or as a result of one's choices. Choices, another word would be decision. Decisions. We might put something up front like the ability to direct one's body or thoughts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, this definition is going to turn out it's a little too simplistic. At least many would say it's a little too simplistic. It needs to be edited, needs to be updated, needs to be revised. Okay, we'll worry about that when we come to that. For now, it's pretty good. Yeah, you're gonna need all this. For now, it's pretty good, right? We asked, why does this matter? We said moral responsibility, or why does free will matter? We said moral responsibility. We also said agency. We connected agency with the larger theme of leading our own lives, having meaningful lives. We can go into that more today. And then we started looking at CIDR. So I broke you all into groups and I had you read the first three paragraphs of the article, the main article on free will that we're working from. Really, there's two, but we're going to deal more with CIDR's article than May's article. And I asked you guys to try to work out how many arguments is CIDR giving in these three paragraphs, and what's the conclusion of those arguments? Is he arguing for free will, against free will? What did we say? Does he seem to be arguing for free will or against free will? What did we conclude? For. Yeah, this can seem kind of confusing. Let's go over some of this, right? Actually, I'm thinking more and more in the future. I would like to slow this class down even further. It is kind of tough because I've slowed it down a lot. And by the way, when I say I slowed it down, it doesn't necessarily mean it's like significantly easier. I think that the way we've been teaching philosophy for too long, it's just been way too fast. It's just been way too fast for anybody. I would like to maybe go even a bit slower so we can spend more time reading things together because I think it's really helpful. I would have to take on a unit for that, so I don't know. But the writing, and again, philosophers often are not the clearest writers. I mean, when we write for professional journals and such, we're usually pretty clear with one another. When we try to write intro books, yeah, it's a bit hit or miss. But it might seem a bit strange. Like if this person wants to defend free will, why would he start off with examples of cases where someone does not have free will? What is his strategy? Why is he trying to do this? It might seem really illogical. If you're going to try to defend free will, why would you start by telling me about cases where we don't have free will? Actually, I think it does make sense. Like, can anyone see why he wants to do that? I think some of you were a bit thrown off by this, right? Some of you were thinking, well, I don't think he does want to defend free will because he starts off with these scenarios where the person doesn't have free will. You know, like why would he do that, Carter? To show what we do is there's a contradiction on the different end, you know what I mean? There's a time when we don't, and there's a time when we do. Sarah, did you want to add to that? Was that basically just what you're going to say? Yeah. What are these, Christian, same thing? What are these cases? The cases are someone, you're killing somebody in all these cases. So one case is somebody like grabs your hand and forces it over a trigger. How often do you think that happens when somebody shoots somebody? Not that often, right? What's the other case? You're hypnotized into killing somebody. How often does that happen? I maybe never. I don't know. I'm really skeptical about things like hypnosis. And again, maybe I shouldn't say that because I haven't studied it. But I just tend to have a pretty strong skepticism on a lot of stuff. Yeah, I know I'm religious. It's weird. We're all weird. But I'm just saying, I'm really asking myself, is anybody ever really been hypnotized? I wonder. In a murdering somebody? Yeah, I don't know about that. Maybe. But if so, it's got to be a tiny portion of the cases, like tiny, tiny, tiny. And then what's the other case where someone pushes you out of an airplane and you land on somebody? I mean, outside of Marvel Comics, no, that doesn't really happen. And actually, at that point, you might say, okay, I get it. Those cases are so rare. Most cases, by implication, he's saying we are free. The only times we aren't free are in these weird cases, right? But then you might be saying these cases are so rare, weird. Why even talk about them at all? Because again, a lot of times if we want to understand something, it's really good to contrast it. It's really good to contrast it. If somebody asks you, like, what are A's? It's often good to start thinking about what are not A's, right? Somebody asks you, what is free will? You could just take that head on, or you might ask yourself, okay, what would it mean not to be free? Like often doing the negatives, doing the contrast is just really, really helpful. Could he have said that? Yeah. I'm writing my own introduction to philosophy book. I will do this, but I'm going to tell the reader this is what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I'll give examples where often it's really helpful to have, right? It's really helpful to have contrast. What's the takeaway from this? We're not free when someone squeezes our finger. We're not free when someone hypnotizes us. We're not free when we're pushed. So when are we free? Well, when those things don't happen. Well, what are those things? What is it about those cases that we don't have free will in those circumstances? Carter? Okay, good. Now, again, we're going to have to be a little bit careful with this. And actually, just to go a little further into that, he gives us three cases. I would say the squeezing and the pushing we can group together. The hypnotism is different. We talked about why at the end of class, yeah?
It's like basically what's outside of physical control.
Okay, good.
Possible.
Yeah, so in the squeezing and in the being pushed, you're not even making a choice to do it. You're not even making a choice. And not only are you not making a choice, you might be doing everything in your power to choose the other way, to make another choice. You might be like screaming at the person, don't do this, but you're overpowered. You have absolutely no control over yourself. You have absolutely no agency. You got no free will. You see here how closely free will and agency seem to be tied together, right? That's the squeezing and being pushed. What about the hypnosis case? What was the deal with that? Because you are making a choice in a hypnosis case. Again, I think it would have been better for him to imagine Elon Musk like mind controlling you, right? Because hypnosis, I think, is just kind of weird. That's just me. You might not think it's so weird. I would rather consider a case where like Zuckerberg or somebody has put like some kind of device in my brain and it can just push a device that makes me do so. That actually seems like maybe. Hypnosis, I'm just kind of like, oh. But what is special about the hypnosis case, Sarah? Great. In the hypnosis case, you are making a choice. And the choice does lead you to direct your path. So you might think, well, then you have agency, then you're free. But here we want to say, no, 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 no. Because the choice is entirely manipulated from the outside. So then maybe we already think we've got to revise this and fix it up. And we have to say that we have agency and freedom just in case what? We make a choice that is completely uninfluenced by external factors, then we're toast. Because again, the only reason any of you know how to speak English or any language is because your parents like barked in your face and your brain absorbed that. If your brain was like, no, we're going to be free. We're not going to take in any influences from outside sources. Then every time your parents tried to speak at you, your brain would have just heard it like Charlie Brown hears the teacher. It would have just sounded like, rah, 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 and you would never learn how to talk. The only way you learn how to talk is because people say stuff in front of you and your brain absorbs that and tries to like understand it and model itself on. Do you see what I'm saying? And by the way, if whenever I said you have homework next week, you are completely uninfluenced by that, you don't want that. You're not going to get a grade you're happy with at the end of this. The thing is, again, we want our choices to be influenced by external factors. We absolutely want that to some degree. To what degree? That actually gets kind of sticky. We already see how there's a little bit of an issue here. Trying to nail this down, it does actually get kind of complicated. And it is actually fascinating. And again, here's the way you could go through this whole unit like this. Okay, I'm sitting in class. I got to do these assignments so I could get my grades, so I could do whatever it is I want to do. But my friends, we really can try to work out here. Do we really think we have free will or not? And if so, what do you think takes it away from you? And by the way, a lot of times people, they do get these kind of ideas in their head. If I really want to lead my own life, I have to be totally different from everybody else. Does that sound right? I don't know. Marco, does that sound right to you? If I'm going to lead my own life, I can't be too influenced by other people, so I should be totally different than anybody else?
I don't even know if it's possible to be totally different.
I doubt it is possible to be totally different. And by the way, if I'm just trying to be totally different, then aren't I still being fixed by them? Because like I'm just reacting to whatever they are, so that's still controlled. Like, what does it even mean to be original? That's a really interesting kind of tough question. And actually, it matters a lot. It drives a lot. It drives a lot of our consumption. By the way, the one way we define ourselves is through like branding. You know what I mean? I'm a sports dude. It's kind of true. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Should I try to be an individual and just go for lacrosse? Okay, you kind of get. I mean, actually, this stuff really does affect us on a lot of levels, right? So I think it's good for us to try and chew on it. All right, I will break you guys into groups in a little bit, but I want to continue with some stuff. He gives us three examples in the first paragraph of when we don't have free will. Why? To help us to see what free will is. It's the opposite. If we don't have it in these cases, why? What's lacking? What's lacking then is what free will is. So it's helping us to see what free will is. It's also helping us to see why it's important and why we think we have it. Because let's go on. Let's read the second paragraph. We're on this. Now, again, you guys did this in your groups on Tuesday. I'll break you into groups again in a little bit. I'll give you more to read, more to chew on. We'll gather, we'll discuss it. But let's read the second paragraph. I think we actually did read this really quickly in class at the end on Tuesday. Are the police and parents fair to blame you for the killings? Obviously not, for you have an unassailable excuse. Now, again, what does unassailable mean? We talked about this briefly. Actually, it might not have been collectively as a class. It might have just been a conversation I had with one of the groups. What does the word unassailable mean? Untouchable, yeah. What does it mean to assail somebody? Like attack them. Yeah, and you might even work that up by saying, I don't really hear assail used as a verb very often, but assailant, I hear that used. Assailant, attacker, attack, unattackable. It's like an airtight defense. Are the police and parents fair to blame you? What are we talking about with blame? We're talking about legal accountability. We're talking about moral accountability. We're talking about moral responsibility. We're talking about ethics. We're talking about morals, right? Moral duties, moral obligations, right? Again, that's why I have the ethics unit before I have the free will unit. Obviously not, for you have an unassailable excuse. You did not act of your own free will. Boom, right there. He just said they wouldn't be able rationally, reasonably, justifiably, logically. It wouldn't be right, which is a normative concept. It wouldn't be right. He says it wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be just. It's a moral concept. It wouldn't be just for them to blame you because you have a really great excuse. You weren't acting out of your own free will. And then you might say, well, why not? Why wouldn't I be acting out of my own free will? Because it goes on to say you couldn't help what you did. You could not have done otherwise. And only those who act freely are morally responsible. What claim did he just make? Only those who are free are morally responsible. So we get an argument here for free will. What's the argument again? By the way, this is what you need to answer question one on the first in-class assignment, right? What is the argument he makes? The first argument for free will? Only those who act freely are morally responsible. How do we build that out? We did this at the end of class on Tuesday, yeah? We have moral responsibility. Always new, but at least some of the time in general. And we could put little qualifiers on here. We have moral responsibility at least sometimes. Or we could rewrite it like this. We're morally responsible for at least some of our actions. Maybe I'll even do it like that. We have moral responsibility. I'll just say like, this just means like, that is to say, we are morally responsible for at least some of our actions. We don't have to say for all. All right, now what's premise two? We have to link this with free will. Now, notice again what we're doing here, class, right? And we do this all the time. If you tell your buddies, I think we got free will, they might say, why? You got to say something that links up with free will. You might say, I don't think we have free will. You go home for dinner tonight and you have dinner with your parents, and your parents are like, hey, you're in a philosophy class right now, right? What did you talk about today? And you tell your parents, my professor said we don't have free will. They might say, why? Why did they say that? You'd have to say, well, my professor tried to link free will with something. We can't just say we have free will. Why? Because we do. Why? You got to link it with something. Link it. You could link it with two things, with three things. Here, we're going to link it with one key thing, moral responsibility. So we're going to say we have moral responsibility, but how do we link this now with free will? So we get an argument for free will? Yeah. If we have moral responsibility, then we have free will. Or we could cleave a little closer to the way that Sider put it. If we are morally responsible for some actions, then we must have performed them freely. So do we see here how he's linking free will with moral responsibility? You see that he's doing it. He is doing it. Why is he doing it? Because again, we don't want to say we have free will just because. We don't want to do that. We don't want to say in science, M&Ms cure cancer. Why? Just because. No. You got to give me something, right? Because why do we have free will? Because we have more responsibility. Well, why is that relevant? Because here, another way to put this is you can only be responsible for something if you do it freely. Right? So we're saying sometimes we are responsible, but that means we're free. Therefore, we're free, at least for those particular actions. Okay? We have free will. At least for some of our actions. That's the argument. That's the first argument. Okay. There's more we can do with this. And again, I hope you see what I'm trying to do. I think a big problem we have in philosophy a lot of the time, we go too fast. We don't break stuff down enough. I want to break this down as far as possible, and I want to motivate it all. And I want you to see we do this stuff all the time. Again, if I I got a couple of friends who are super into football. If I this weekend, actually I think I'm gonna hang out with some of them. If I say I think the Bears are gonna win the Super Bowl, what are they gonna ask? Why would you say that? And if I say, well, because the Bears play in Chicago, does that sound like good evidence? Then why have they only won one Super Bowl in the past? Did they used to play in Green Bay? No, they've always been in Chicago. Then that can't be the reason why they're going to win. Now, if I start saying something about, well, I think they drafted a really good quarterback. Well, then why hasn't he performed so well in the past? Well, they had bad coaching. So do we have better coaching? Oh, yeah, we got a new coach. He seems really great. Do you kind of see how we're doing this thing? Right? I mean, even something that you think of as subjective. If I say, I don't know, I think Teletubbies, you tell me, I think Teletubbies is the best TV show ever. Let me say why. And even if I think that's subjective, I expect you to say something. You know what I'm saying? The characters are interesting. You guys know what Teletubbies is? I don't know if okay. I'm expecting you to say something at least, even if I think it's subjective. I mean, if you come up and say, I think Pizza Hut's way better than Domino's, I might still ask why. Now, if you told me I just like it better, I might say, okay. But I might even there expect you to say something. Well, I like this sauce, I think it has something. Right? Again, we want to know why we think what we do, why we act like we do, why other people think like they do, why they act like they do. We're kind of these sort of beings. We're kind of built to seek reasons for it. We can make sense of that. If we believe things totally at random, that often does not go well for us, right? So here we are. Does it make sense why we're linking? Well, let's do it this way. Do we agree that we have moral responsibility? I didn't really ask you guys. First of all, I haven't had time to grade your ethics in class assignments yet. I should have put a question on there asking you, do you agree that we have free will? I mean, do you agree with moral objectivism? I guess I kind of did. You know, I didn't have you like write on it separately, but yeah, I'll think I'll have some sense of where you're at after reading your assignments, right? But my guess is maybe, I don't know, some of you at least were convinced by moral objectivism. Maybe I'm trying to look around right now. See, Sarah, Nicole, Claudia, any of you convinced by moral? But even if you're saying no, 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 I'm a relativist, I think you can run this argument on moral relativism. Is moral relativism nihilism? Claudia, is moral relativism the same thing as nihilism? No. Nicole, is moral relativism the same thing as nihilism? No, nihilism is saying it's all an illusion. Relativism says it's real, it's just relative. I think you can actually make this argument on relativism. Because relativism is still saying you do have duties, they're just relative, right? I think this is good even on relativism. As long as you're not a moral nihilist, I think you should probably go with this. And again, I think there's very few nihilists. I think probably zero that could act on it consistently. Right? Again, go watch Big Lebowski. All right. So I think we're probably Christian. Do you think we're pretty good with one? Okay. Yeah. It's really hard for me to even imagine how we really could consistently act on nihilism. Again, go to Big Lebowski. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. This isn't exactly what happens in Big Lebowski. You know, I'm gonna alter, but someone like, I don't know, kidnaps your significant other and like cuts off their pinky toe, you're just gonna say, hey, cool. You know what I mean? Someone like, shoots off the pinky toe, your significant other, you say, cool. Someone sees you walking your dog or your cat or your ferret or whatever, and they just aim their car at your pet and squash it, and you're like, hey, that's cool. You turn in all your work for class and your professor says, I just want to give you an F because I really like the letter F. I think F means fantastic, so I just can't. You say, hey, that's cool. There's no way you're going to do this, right? No, you're not going to do that. Like, we have no choice but to evaluate people's actions in some way or other. We don't do that with rocks. We do that with us. We're on the two. Why do we link up moral responsibility with free will? Why would we do this? Does this make sense? Does this make sense? First of all, we can just do it like Carter? Yeah. Yeah, can we say more about that? We can start with just examples. Like, what are things we do not hold morally accountable? Rocks. Why? Because they don't have free will. Okay, great. But can we say more why? Why? We can use examples like this in these contrast cases to help figure out what our pattern of judgments is, but now we need to explore a little more the rationale for them. Why might we think free will is critical to moral responsibility? We can say, well, why don't I hold the rock accountable? Well, because it doesn't have free will. Okay, say more. Can we go into that more deeply? Maybe this is where it helps to actually have spelled out what we might mean by free will a little bit more. Marco?
By moral responsibility, do we mean repercussions? Because I feel like you could have repercussions without free will.
Yeah, if what we mean by repercussions is punishment, you can arguably have that without free will, and you can have responsibility without repercussions. We could choose not to put somebody in jail. We could choose not to fine somebody, even if we think they are responsible. Right. But yeah. It really, that in essence, punishment really is a separate issue. Cider will go into that a little more in the next section. Yeah.
Back to the reading, like if you're forced to kill someone, you have no other, like that is whatever you did is your moral responsibility. There's no other. That's your moral. There's no other. You don't hold the responsibility for it as you're forced to do it.
Because you're forced to do it. Yeah. Can we even go further? Again, I think a lot of times, I hate to say this, I think Cider is a really great philosopher, but I think sometimes he could explain things more. I think this is a big reason why philosophy doesn't work more in college. We can break this down even further. What does he say? I'll use this example. I'm not going to really break it down more than him. I'm just going to try to like come at it from his approach again and add, get a little further into what he says, and then I'll add a further argument on this from David Hume, and maybe that'll help us out. But remember, I use this coffee example. I'm standing at the DMV. You all know what the DMV is, right? I know a lot of you don't get driver's licenses at 16. Like when I was a kid, we all got driver's licenses as soon as we turned 16, except for me, because I got kicked out of driver's ed in school. That's a story I'm not going to tell you. It was not my fault. I was hanging out with a bad crowd. We all got booted from driver's ed on the crime what my friends did. But I eventually got my driver's license. But when you go to the DMV to take your test, like the DMV is like proverbially unpleasant. Long lines, hella boring. No one wants to go to the DMV. So I bring a cup of coffee and I'm at the DMV, and somebody behind me just decides to make me spill my coffee. So again, I'm just sitting there, maybe just staring up at the ceiling, and somebody hits my arm from behind. Now, again, I don't expect they're going to hit me. I don't want them to hit me. And once they do hit me, I'm completely unable to control my arm. And the coffee flies on the person in front of me, and let's say it ruins their shirt. Who's responsible for restitution? So maybe I ruined this person's really nice Packers hoodie. Who's got to pay that person? Who should pay that person to replace that hoodie? Me? Well, you threw the coffee on him. Carter?
Person ran into you.
Person ran into me. Okay, fascinating. So this is where, and I don't know how the law works on this kind of thing, but I did TA one course in philosophy of law when I was in grad school, and I think I remember the professor saying something like, there are actually cases in torts, like where you sue somebody, where there might be a penalty, even if we don't think the person was really quite responsible, because we might say it's reasonable for that person to like recover a loss, and you're just going to find the person that seems most responsible for it, right? But let's suppose they really, really did. And again, law and morality aren't exactly the same thing. But let's suppose that person really, really, really did push my arm just to make me spill the coffee with malicious intent. They were bored, and this is how they chose to alleviate their boredom. They're like, the DMV is hella boring. What would make this a little more interesting? Right? Who should pay the dude for the Packers jersey? The other dude. But why? Why not make me do it? Yeah, Chris? Yeah, Chris?
There because it wasn't your choice to ruin the shirt.
Okay, I didn't even choose to. I didn't want to. Can we even add a little more to that? I was forced to. I think to. Can we add a little more to that? Yeah. Okay, good. Outside force. Okay, yeah. All of this, put it together. The way that Sider's going to try to unpack this even a little more. He's going to say you couldn't help what you did. You could not have done otherwise. You were forced. What do we mean by that? You couldn't have done otherwise. There was no alternative. There was no option. Can we even go? This is helpful, but can we even go a little bit further? I think we can. Again, David Hume had this principle. He was this great Scottish philosopher, died in 1776. And he had this principle, and not all philosophers agree with actually, but a lot do. It's called ought implies can. You can't have a duty to do what is totally beyond your powers. And again, I think I've used it in this class before. Does anybody here think I am a bad person because I have failed to solve the problem of world poverty? No. No. Why? Why should I not be held morally accountable for the fact that there are poor people in the world? Why not blame me for failing to have solved world poverty? Why? Why? I can't, there's nothing I can do about it. You might say, well, I think you could do at least something. And have you done something? And if I say I haven't done none, then maybe you're like, you're kind of a jackass. You could do that. But to blame me for not having solved like poverty totally, it wouldn't make sense because I just can't do that. It'd almost be like blaming me, like saying you're a really bad athlete. Why? Because you've never jumped over the moon. Okay. It doesn't make sense to have that kind of standard. You know what does this add a little more, help it make more logical, right? Well, it just doesn't make sense to have duties, to have obligations, to be praised or blamed for things. I mean, also you could say, hey, Wolf, I think you're such a great guy. Why? The pyramids of Egypt. Thanks. They're constructed 5,000 years before my birth. You know, I mean, like, it doesn't make sense, right? It only really makes sense to like praise or blame relative to some kind of standard. It has to be something that's actually relevant to the person, that they have at least some ability to engage with it to some degree. If I have no control over my body, it doesn't make any sense to do that. This almost, I mean, I don't want to be too like, I hope this doesn't sound too weird, but I just really want to drive the point home. It would almost be like, okay, I'll switch it up a bit. If someone's in a coma, they're in a total coma, and I don't know, they fail to pick up a pen for a doctor who drops a pen in the hotel room. You jerk! They dropped their pen. You didn't even try to help. They're in a freaking coma. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't make any sense. If we believe in free will, or so if we believe in more responsibility, but it only makes sense to believe in that if we think people have some control over themselves, then we're already logically committed to the idea that people have some control over themselves. And this, I think, where philosophy can be really great, because we might say, you know what, I never would have put that together like that. Well, you would have, if you had enough time. But again, no philosopher just comes up with all this stuff on their own. We all read people who have been doing this for thousands of years, and we borrow all of their stuff, and then we add on just a teeny little bit. Right? I mean, we already got Aristotle was doing this stuff for us over 2,000 years ago. It's a pretty decent argument, isn't it? Sure seems like it. Yeah, go ahead.
So like in the coffee example.
Yeah.
What if the person who got ran into, like they weren't paying attention? Then the other person did so by accident, maybe because they got in the way. Now,
Okay.
the person who obviously got hit and spilled the coffee wasn't paying attention, but is it their fault still because they weren't paying attention, or
Okay, good.
if they did not?
I think the way that we normally judge this stuff, if you go back to like the poison candy thing I had, this is where things get kind of complicated, right? Is I think we're often like operating with the standard of what's reasonable to pay attention to. Because if we make people accountable for any old odd possibility, then actually we're never allowed to get out of bed, and we're never allowed to stay in bed, and we can't even make sense of agency or our lives. And that seems too extreme. That seems too extreme. Right. But if I knew, like if we did like this, there was kids running around me and they're bumping into people, and I just have a really hot coffee like this, and yeah, then maybe it's like I've got some responsibility to pay attention to that. But it can't be, it's kind of like in a way, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. If it's like even an unreasonable doubt, we can never convict anybody. If we have to like anticipate, oh, I don't know, there could be like Sith Lords in the room right now. There could be a Sith Lord about this cloaked that's going to swing a lightsaber at me right now. So I should duck down. But there could be a Sith Lord down, Yoda could be down there about to like, so I got to, it's like, what the hell do? You can just, at some point, you just kind of got to live your life. We kind of go by what's reasonable, right? Yeah, Carmen?
Yeah, I feel like wouldn't it be on him for like lack of awareness? Like morally to be on him, because it's like if you like
Yeah.
someone you rear-end someone with a car, and it's because you weren't like.
Yeah, it might just really depend on the details. Like if you're on your phone and you run into somebody, yeah. But I don't know if like a squirrel falls out of a tree in front of you and you just impulsively kind of reactively swerve out of the way and then you hit somebody's mailbox, we might still make you pay for the mailbox. And that might make sense because we might think, well, we don't want the person who owns the home who didn't do anything to contribute to destruction in their life, like they shouldn't have to pay for it. So we might make you pay for it. But we might say, we're not saying you're a bad person for this. It's kind of just a freak accident, but sometimes you just have to pay for a freak accident. Right. This is my sense of how some of this stuff gets handled in law. But I'm not a lawyer. I don't have legal training. Yeah.
It could be a range of blameworthy.
Sure.
Like if like what I said with the coffee, could the person be sort of blameworthy, not fully? Because even though they didn't intend to, they sort of weren't paying attention.
I think it would kind of depend. My guess is if we could probably spell out the stories in ways and get a whole range of judgments. And we might not all agree on all the details, and that's okay. We don't have to. You know? Yeah, I think so. But does this argument kind of make sense? And again, Sider is a hardcore atheist materialist. I think he thinks this is a good argument. My guess is he's probably not a moral objectivist, but he might be. A lot of atheist materialist philosophers are. But even on relativism about morality, this argument I think is good. He's going to go on in this article to say we absolutely must believe in free will. And he's actually going to argue we really have no choice. And then, well, how can we be free then? He'll get to that. But it's almost like we're psychologically constituted to actually treat one another as having agency. I'll get into that in a little bit. There's one thing I want to draw your attention to. When he says at the end of the second paragraph, you couldn't help what you did, you could not have done otherwise. There are a lot of philosophers who would say that's actually how we need to define free will. We need to say that you're free in performing an action X only if and only if you could have chosen otherwise and done otherwise. A lot of philosophers actually say that's too strong a condition. Actually, Sider himself will not accept that as a definition of free will. I don't want to get into that too much, but I just want to flag that for you. But it is kind of a natural thought. What he's really kind of saying at the end of the day is in order to have free will, it's got to be that there's like a fork in the road and you choose which side you go down. And then you're like, well, that's got to be, because if there's only one path I'm allowed to walk, then it can't be, I'm really free. Well, Sider's going to say maybe you still could be. Right. We'll get to that later. That's kind of technical, but we'll move on. All right, so now let's go down to the third paragraph. This is where it does get kind of sticky. Let's read. We all believe that we have free will. How could we not? You might almost think you get a whole other argument there, which he doesn't really develop. This, I'll call it the practical argument for free will, according to which we just cannot help but believe it, which again doesn't mean that we have it, but it would mean you can't really doubt it. We'll talk about that in a minute. Now he goes on to say, renouncing freedom would mean no longer planning for the future, for why make plans if you're not free to change what will happen? Does that sound like he's still talking about morality per se or something else? Bobby? I agree.
Like why change where you're going when you start.
I agree with you. I don't think he's talking about more responsibility anymore. Not directly. It's a little ambiguous because he's not as clear as he could be. That just happens. One way we could run the argument is an argument from agency. We could just do it like this. We have agency. If we have agency, then we have free will. By the way, I didn't review this earlier, but with the previous argument, we asked, do we think the premises are true? We didn't ask if the premises are true, would the conclusion be true? But we did talk last time, this is modus ponens. If the premises are true, the conclusion's got to be true. We have free will. Are we all good with premise one? Sarah, are you good with that? We have agency. Are we good with two? Yeah, I mean, here you might almost think it's just a definition or close enough. It's even easier. They're the same thing, or they're so tightly connected. You can't reasonably pull them apart at all. So of course the conclusion's going to go through, but maybe we could do it in a bit of a different way than the argument from leading a meaningful life. And we say something like this, like premise one is we lead meaningful lives. If we lead meaningful lives, then we must have free will. So we have free will. But this does get a little stickier. Because what does it mean to lead a meaningful life? It does get a little stickier. And by the way, we can always ask, do we use these terms in only one way? Do you think we might use the phrase meaningful life in more than one way? Do you think there might be a sense in which we all have meaningful lives, but we can also waste our lives and have a meaningless life? Okay, yeah, I think we do talk like that. It's not necessarily contradiction, right? If we're using it in different ways. Why? I just want to go over this really quickly. Why do you think human life matters? Why is it meaningful? This connects back with ethics too. Why shouldn't we destroy human beings for no good reason? Because they matter. Well, why do they matter? Sometimes I get a little sad when I ask classes this and they don't give me any answer, but then I just remind myself, they probably got really great answers or just do, they just don't want to put them out there in front of everybody. Why might we think human life matters? Okay, good. Why is it valuable? Okay, I think you have one, dude. I'm not looking to get into that right now.
Like to be a mind.
So you're taking things that are really interesting, or at least they can be taken in an interesting direction, dealing with, given that we might not know whether there's an afterlife or what it might look like, how should that affect the way we view our present life? There's a lot of fascinating questions with that, which a lot of ancient philosophers really dug into. Yeah, there's a lot we could do with that. Anything else? I think we could give a lot of answers here. Anything else? The one thing don't tell me is because people care about us. Because there's people that care about cocaine. I don't think that necessarily confers value on cocaine. So don't just say people care about us, but maybe we could say more about that, not just that they care, but yeah. Okay, so maybe it's because something about the rarity of human life, something like that. And again, for all these things, we could put some pressure on this too. We could start asking, can we think of things that are rare, we wouldn't say are valuable, things that are common, that we think could still be valuable. But yeah, I think for a lot of us, something about the rarity. And maybe we don't have to just stick with something, really general about how many of them there are in the universe and what fraction of the universe they are, but we can start looking specifically about how they came about, right? Yeah. Yeah. So why might we think human life is valuable? Okay, good. We could talk about memory. I mean, that's actually a really wild, weird thing, isn't it? Memory. Anything else about us? I think all these answers are right, by the way. Again, I don't think we should expect there's just one answer. Too often we get ourselves in this one. By the way, Carter, one thing you asked before, like, what do I think about salvation in the Bible? How do people get saved? I think a big problem is our assumption that there's only one dimension of salvation. I think St. Paul is pretty clear. There's not one answer to how are you saved, because salvation has multiple dimensions. So I think that already gets us in trouble when we start expecting there to be just like one answer to how you get saved. You're going to collapse different dimensions of salvation. We do this a lot. We think that there's just one answer to something. No, it'd be 50. Why did the car accident happen? It was dark. Maybe also because it was wet. Maybe also because it was foggy. Maybe also because the road was curvy. I mean, it could be a lot of things that contribute to it, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think like objective morality is why human lives matter.
Okay, so ultimately you might say if we're saying it matters, there's got to be objective value. If we're saying objective, okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. I mean, I think that's right. Yeah. But just to add a little more onto this, I think everything you guys said is right. We could add more to this. I mean, our capacity for creativity is really astounding. You think about how creative people are. You think about all the art we've produced, the music we've produced. A student in my other class was going on and on and on about English cuisine just consisting of boiled peas. And if you're listening, Evan, I'm sorry. I busted you out of my other class, but I think maybe the English got something a little better than boiled peas going on too. But but you think about all of our culinary creativity. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like people just do a lot of amazing stuff. Our creativity. You could think about our memories. Not just that people care about us, because someone could care about cocaine, but it's not just that. It's how we're able to connect, like how richly we're able to connect. You don't connect like that with cocaine. Right? You could talk about just our capacity, our consciousness, our awareness, our ability to think, our ability to feel, the way we feel, all this stuff. And some of this we share with animals, and we can accord value to them too. How much of this stuff seems to presuppose having free will? to having agency, to being able to direct yourself. Maybe not all of it, but maybe some of it. Maybe we're good. Plus, maybe Cider's going after something a little bit different here, not just this, but something a little narrower. The more that our choices are constrained, we do kind of feel in a way that the meaning of our lives is kind of diminished because we feel in a way actually we don't even have agency. Maybe in a way it's just got a sense of meaning of life here that really kind of does just almost coincides with just raw agency. You know, if you live in a society where you're told, I don't know that much about North Korea, but the little bit I know about it, it's not a place I would want to live. I can't go down to the bookstore and say, hey, I'd like to put my hands on a copy of Hamlet. I don't know, is it as grim there as I don't would I be arrested for that if I you know what I mean? If I said, hey, I think I might want to be a Buddhist or a Christian or a Muslim, you know, or a capitalist or anything other than what you're telling me, and then I got to go to jail? Like, so what are my options? Well, I don't know. You could be a laborer. Okay, that's all right, but only this kind with this da 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 da. You have to, you know what I mean? Like, if you keep getting all these freedoms taken away, at a certain point, you just kind of feel like this isn't even a life anymore. It's like even to have a life in any meaningful sense requires having some kind of agency. Eisner's right. Well, do we think we have these lives? Sure. How do we see that? Well, first of all, we could say that person's got one and I don't. You know what I mean? That person on Instagram's got it and I don't. Right there, you think somebody's got it, or at least it's possible to have it. Right? Okay. Yeah, Marco?
No, I was just gonna say, like, technically there is one Buddhist temple in North Korea.
Yes, sir.
I think it's supposed to only be for show, obviously.
Okay. Let's say there's a back like lead into a state prison. You know what I mean? You walk in the front door and you know, the trap door opens up beneath your feet like in the cartoon, and you know, ride a slide into the state prison. And
Spying on your reporting.
I'm not planning on setting foot in it. It's actually really sad. I don't want to go off on this too much. I don't know too much about it, but it's really, really sad. I mean, you can look at pictures of like Korea at night, the Korean Peninsula, and like South Korea is all lit up, and North Korea is like all dark. It's really sad, you know. I got a buddy from South Korea. He's a South Korean national. He's actually lived back there for a while. He says South Korea's got a lot of problems. A lot of problems. We all do. But man, I'd much rather live in South Korea for all. And it's got a lot of same problems we do. In South Korea. I'd much rather live in South Korea, North Korea, any day of the week. Any day of the week. Right. I'd much rather live in China than North Korea. Right. Also, we don't have the same kind of freedoms in China that we have here. The government there censors the internet a lot more, all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's sad, you know, but that kind of thing. Do you guys know about this kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm. Pretty powerful.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's not great, but yeah. There it is. You don't have to like blame all the people for that, or you know, reduce whole Chinese civilization. But that's the facts. Like, you know what I mean? There's like different levels of freedom, and we might worry too about going too far with it. You know, can we kind of go overboard the other way with freedom? I mean, there's a lot of really deep questions to ask here. You know, actually, just to go on to this a little bit, sometimes I think we think that real freedom means, I don't know, I should just be allowed to annoy people left and right. You know, like maybe in some sense, but is that what we really want out of this thing? What is freedom really valuable for? You know, and sometimes actually religious concepts of freedom clash with our kind of secular political ones too, right? But I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Like, why does this really matter? What do we really want it for? Okay, so we've got how many arguments then the Cider give us? I think 2. What are they? The argument for moral responsibility, and then one of these 2. Which one is it? I think they're kind of the same, but not exactly the same for him. It's a little bit fuzzy. Could he have been clear about this? You bet. Let's read this paragraph again, this third paragraph. We all believe that we have free will. How can we not? Renouncing freedom would mean no longer planning for the future, for why make plans if you are not free to change what will happen? Okay. It would mean renouncing morality. Okay. Without it, we would march along predetermined paths, unable to control our destiny. Such a life is not worth living. Okay. He's switching back and forth. Right? This is how we would say, today, this is how we would advise somebody to write a philosophy paper. We would say, this is what we do when we write papers for journals. We say things like this. In this paper, I'm going to give 4 arguments for free will. The first is called this. The second is called this. The third is called this. The fourth is called this. In the next paragraph, I'm going to review the first argument. We're very clear. How many arguments are they? Where do they stop and start? He's flipping back and forth. And you don't even really get a clear count. And honestly, even that first sentence, we all believe we have free will. How could we not? You could even take that as a whole separate argument. You could say these are the two. These are the two he gives us. The moral responsibility, and then you could just write down agency or leading a meaningful life, whichever one you want. I think it's a bit ambiguous. They're almost the same. What other arguments for free will do we know of? Does anybody know of any others? Maybe we're not going to do our group activity today. We'll get to it next time. That's all right. I don't think we actually need a group activity every day. It feels like we're all kind of like, we're good. Anybody know of any other arguments for free will? Anybody got anything else? Here's one that you might find interesting. Eric, are you ever hungry?
Hungry right now.
How do you know? You ever thirsty?
Right now. I didn't bring my water bottle. I left in the car.
Dude, can't help you out. That's Matt. If you could polish off this Frappuccino. Okay. Nicole, do you ever get sleepy? How do you know? There's all kinds of stuff where we say we know it's real. Why? Because we feel it. It's an interesting question whether or not you could basically feel your free will. We'll have a little class demonstration. You can do this sometimes in philosophy. Class, I'm going to tell my hand in my brain to go up. Why'd it go up? Because I made a choice. Do you know you made a choice? Sure. How do you know? It was right there in my head. Not only that, but my hand went up because of the choice. Now, how do you know that? I could just feel it. And I could even do it like this, slow, keep going, keep going, keep going. It's like we just experience our freedom. We just experience it. It's just there.
Right. It's something learned in psychology that your subconscious like controls like what you're born to do. There's a study that like people like hold a randomly press a button and their subconscious always do exactly what they button.
Okay, good. I will actually say, seriously, there are some very serious problems with that study. In at least 2 ways. Yeah, there actually was some problems with the science. I'm glad you mentioned that because we're going to talk about that eventually. But there's actually problems with it in 2 ways. Like one way is that there's actually 3 ways there's a problem with it. There's been some scientists and philosophers who both critique some of the experimental design around that, but others have said that if we're free, this is exactly what we should expect to see. It's almost like saying heliocentrism is false because it looks like the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, but that's exactly what you would expect to see. There's no reason we should not expect to see some subconscious neural activity before we raise our hand. It's actually exactly what we should expect. And then some people have also pointed out that even if they showed we didn't have free will, it would be for a very. And we should not think we have free will for all of our choices. Or all of our current choices. But we'll talk about that more as we come. But yeah, I do want to build off that though a little bit here. So you can actually start wondering about this, right? So we can start wondering about like particular experiments. Can it be something even bigger beyond those sort of experiments that might, pose a problem for this? Eric raised the problem of God. So we should talk about these experiments more later because they're really interesting. You might say, well, what if God's making you raise your hand? Some would say, well, we're still free. Then we have to look at that. Would that really follow? Carter?
I was gonna go with a different argument, I was gonna say, we can force, not to have free will. but we can force not to. Ooh, that's fine.
Okay, we'll chew on that next week. Sarah? Yeah, good. These are gonna come up again, Cider will get into some of these later. Again, one thing we want to be careful of, when we say we're free, we don't mean all the time. We don't mean all the time, and we don't mean to the same degree. And actually, that's a good thing. We actually do need to have some stuff that's impulse, and we do need to offload some stuff sometimes. Because if we had to actually make like a fully, like aware choice, whatever that means for each and every single thing, we would just be utterly overwhelmed. We'd be utterly overwhelmed. Right. So yeah, and by the way, this is going to get Cider in a bit of trouble. A lot of times when people want to argue against free will, they really focus on just one kind of subset of actions. But in a way, that's almost like saying, well, that guy was hypnotized, therefore nobody's ever. Maybe no, when you're hypnotized, you're not free. But it might be, there's a lot of things we're not doing. Right. So yeah, that might require us to start drilling down a little more to different types of thinking that we engage in and different types of decision making. And we might even want to start drilling down into what we're calling these reactions, this impulsivity. Yeah. Okay, good. Let's leave that one there for now. Good. I'm actually kind of glad the way no one came up with anything else, but we could call that though the phenomenological argument that you could just experience your freedom. The practical argument, now again, this isn't really an argument for free will per se. It's more an argument that we can't like seriously not believe it, is that it would actually be impossible for us psychologically to think and act as if free will isn't real. And we couldn't really treat other people like rocks. We just can't do that, right? We just can't really do that consistently. We could have religious arguments. I believe in this religion. This religion says I have freedom. I'm a Jew, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Hindu, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Sikh. My religion teaches I have free will, therefore I have free will. Believe it or not, there's actually a number of scientists that argue that we have positive scientific evidence for free will. There's some biologists, for example, Kevin Mitchell. There's some other ones out there. Actually, I took a couple of chapters of Kevin Mitchell's recent book and put it on Blackboard. There's actually some scientists out there who argue we actually have pretty solid scientific evidence for free will, right? Yeah, just 1 second, Eric. We also have these transcendental arguments, right? This is kind of a Kantian argument. It would go like this. Even to question whether you have free will, you have to presuppose you have it. Because to question it, I'm engaging in a process of reasoning. I have to believe I can direct my own thoughts. I'm directing the inquiry. Also, if I'm doing this, I'm showing I value truth, right? And that I have some accountability to it. So maybe in 2 ways, maybe even in more ways, even in question free will, you're actually logically committed to, you're presupposing it logically. Some people will even just say from behavioral modification, the fact that people change their behavior consciously. Sometimes people get over tough addictions and things like this. Sometimes people think that counts as evidence for free will. I don't want to go too much into these. I'll just say that you will probably think these arguments are not all on the same level. Like even if you're a free will skeptic and think we don't have free will, or that you don't know if we have free will, you're probably not going to see all these arguments as having the same force. Right? And you don't want to take a guess behavioral modification. How strongly do you think a lot of it's kind of on a weaker side? Because it kind of seems like it's presupposing other things, right? There's more fundamental issues that need to be tackled, right? But some of those you might actually find are kind of interesting. Eric, did you want to weigh in?
I just had a question. For the scientific arguments.
Yeah.
I was wondering what one of them was, and if one of them was like, the fact that we can kind of go ahead from biology with our decisions.
Yeah, it actually can take you back to behavioral modification, and maybe for that, it kind of depends on what type of behavioral modification you're talking about. But yeah, here's the book by Kevin Mitchell. I put a couple of chapters of this on this from Blackboard. It's How Evolution Gave Us Free Will. He's a biology professor. Where does he teach? I kind of forget. This book actually, it's published by Princeton University Press. This book got a lot of attention. I mean, Steven Pinker. So yeah, he's a neurogeneticist. He teaches at Trinity College Dublin, which is one of the best colleges in the world. There's actually more and more scientists that are starting to write books like this saying that we have pretty good evidence from science that we have free will. And he actually, he actually even discusses why evolution would, how it could produce free will and why it would confer a survival advantage, why it would be selected. As you can imagine, not everybody would be persuaded. But it is interesting to highlight, though, that we do have some scientists saying we've got good evidence against free will. We actually have scientists saying actually the opposite is true. We've got good evidence for free will coming out of science. What kind of questions do you think we should tackle next? But we're done with question number 1. On the in-class assignment. Where do you think we should go next? Don't say question number 2 on the in-class assignment, because that's not what we're going to do. I think when you guys did that before, that was pretty funny. What do you think we should do next? I just threw out a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, you can ask questions. Well, what about some of that science that seems to point the other way? Okay, I don't want to help you out too much. I'm not trying to like go too. Part of it is I'm trying to manage the clock right now. And the other part is I just, well, in general, it is managing the clock. I kind of have a sense of like what I want to get to. I can't be too inflexible about that. But what do you think we should do next? Should we say, well, I think we all like these 2 arguments. At least you only need 1 argument. When I was in grad school in philosophy, I always tried to give 10 arguments for everything I believed. And a friend of mine actually said, well, you only need 1. I was like, yeah, right. A lot of times people will question 1, so we'll get as many as we can, right? Should we just say, well, I don't think all those arguments are great, but we don't need them all to worry. We all believe the earth is round. We don't have to accept every argument that the earth is round. There are bad arguments for the earth being round. Basketballs are round. Everything's shaped like a basketball. Therefore, the earth is round. That's a bad argument, but the conclusion is solid. We always say, who cares if some of these arguments don't sound quite right? We feel like we're good. Enough of them are good. Do we feel that way? Or do we think, no, what should we do now? Can we just end our free will unit? We said a little bit about what it is. Yeah, we noted that someone might have an issue with our definition, but there's all kinds of stuff that we never really get a totally precise definition for. Right? We said we care about it for these reasons. Well, our 2 arguments for it actually deliver what we want out of it. That's pretty good. Maybe we're done. Eric, what do you think we need to do?
We gotta look at arguments that don't coincide with our definition of free will.
Okay, we could definitely do that.
We also gotta look at some of them.
Okay,
And
the transcendental. I'm not going to say too much about it, but and really that, and it's not the way I just pitch it. It's not necessarily an argument for free will, but more an argument that you have to presuppose it. But it can be kind of easy to turn it into an argument for free will per se. Transcendental, it can mean a bunch of different things actually, but people have used that in different ways. But here it's just really kind of talking about something that's presupposed. It's like that transcends, that goes beyond. It's like you can kind of think it's like meta. You know what I mean? Like your focus is down here, but what you're doing down here presupposes something from above, something meta, something transcendent, right? To make sense of this down here, you need something above up here or below down here, right? What you're doing here requires something outside it. So if you believe in this, you should believe in that. It's like if you believe in baseball games, you should believe in baseball fields, because that's where the games take place, that kind of thing, right? Yeah. That's good. And people do use that word in a lot of different ways, and it can get kind of wonky. So, yeah. Marco?
Like, to what extent are conditions, affecting like people's choices, and like, is there like a degree to which people have free will?
Okay, good. Yeah, degrees of free will. And this could tie in back too to what Christian was asking about earlier. Yeah. Yeah. And I think you guys, this is kind of what you're saying, but just to go a little further, do we have any arguments against free will? Again, Christian already mentioned one. And again, the way the one that Eric mentioned about God, if God exists, let's put it this way. We don't think we're being hypnotized very often. We don't think that Zuckerberg's got the mind control devices yet. Let's not worry about whether God might rob us of free will by decreeing all of our choices and actions. What else might rob us of free will? Even potentially neuroscience, maybe our biology, maybe social forces. Is there anything else? Is there any other like force out there that we think might rob us of free will? Time? Yeah, actually, with fatalistic arguments, yeah, we could talk about those, absolutely. I could give you, by the way, this book has also got a chapter on fatalism. I could send it to you. You could read that chapter. It's really interesting. Maybe I'll make a video on it. Just really quickly, Aristotle was such a badass philosopher. Aristotle already talked about this. He had this work called, in English, we usually call it De Interpretatio. Some of these books we call after their Latin names. It basically means on interpretation. And Aristotle in that book on interpretation, I think it's chapter 9 maybe. He talks about this sea battle, and he gives this argument that's really interesting. He does not endorse the argument. He discusses it. He doesn't endorse it. He's not saying you should accept it. He actually he thinks the argument's flawed, and he wants to try to diagnose where the flaw is. But it kind of goes back to the God thing. Without God, he says that we could say right now, let's just do it differently. I won't do it with the sea battle. Either the Bears are going to win this weekend or they're going to lose. They play the Giants, I think, this Sunday, right? Either they're going to win or lose. Well, if it's true right now that they're going to win, so we could say, so either win or lose. I mean, they could tie. Let's not worry about that. Fine. They could win, lose, or tie. Okay. If they end up winning, it was true all along that they were going to win. If they end up losing or tying, it was true all along that they were going to lose or tie. So it's true. So whether they're going to win right now or tie right now or lose right now, it's already true that they're going to do that. But then if it's already true now, it's got to happen. It has to happen. It's inevitable. Well, if it's inevitable, it's not free. It's an argument like just the nature of time and logic. Time and logic are all you need to rob us of freedom. Almost no philosophers think this argument works, right? Aristotle didn't think it worked, but it is interesting. And some people actually do worry about this a lot. They watch Final Destination 1, 2, 3, whatever. They think they got no free will. Yeah, someone hand up. Marco?
I've kind of thought of this one, right? If you believe like God created the world, kind of sets the barriers of reality.
Yep.
And like the conditions in which reality functions are already preset.
Yeah.
So like everything that arises afterward is based on those conditions. So then you're kind of robbed of free will because the choices that are available to you are already pre-made.
Okay, yeah, good. But then here's where we might want to argue in response. Yeah, that again, freedom, it's okay for it to be limited. Yeah. And actually, it has to be. For beings like us to exist, it has to be. Yeah. And again, it's even a good thing. Like, again, it's good that our bodies, like, if you think about it, I don't want to be gross, but if our bodies didn't put a lot of pressure on us to go to the bathroom, that could be gross. You know what I mean? Especially when you really get into like Dark Souls 3, you know what I mean? Or I don't know, Elden Ring, right? Like you kind of want your body to be like, no, dude, or do that. Put the controller down and go use the bathroom. Go eat something. Go sleep. If we got too much of that, that's maybe not great. But it might be arguably, again, for at least for beings like us to have freedom. We actually do need some kind of real structure. And so, and it's like, okay, it's like we can't decide, like there's certain, we're gonna talk about, maybe there might be laws of psychology. This can kind of go back to the stuff Christian was talking about too. And at first it might seem like, well, geez, if they're laws of psychology, then, that's really, that, maybe that robs me of freedom. But then we gotta stop and ask, well, what are we really expecting? To be able to use your thoughts to decide how thoughts are gonna work? How would that even work? And then you might say, okay, so that just shows free will's an illusion. Maybe we just need to slow down a bit and say it's actually kind of okay if there's already a decent amount of structure that we step into. Right? You almost maybe want to think about being a play. Like there's a lot of different ways you could play Hamlet, but you can't kind of pull it. I mean, I guess maybe you could play him as like, somebody who is a manager at Chipotle, because we update these things, but there's got to be limits. Do you know what I'm saying? There's got to be some limits, or it's not Hamlet. Maybe that's a bad analogy in some ways, but you know what I'm saying. You might say we need some structure, and I'm gonna be like, thank you, Lord. Thank you for the structure. You did a really nice job on setting up the structure. Thank you, Ma. Whatever it is, yeah, go ahead.
Well, you think there was
Yes.
why does it matter?
Here's why I think, because I do think it is relevant to morality, and also because agency, meaningful life, all of it. But yeah, I absolutely believe in free will. I'm actually gonna argue that when we start looking at all the threats to free will, that number one, a lot of those threats are illusory, and number two, they're not really threats in the first place. So it doesn't even matter. I think it doesn't matter what the science says. We're free no matter what. I don't think free will is held hostage to any results of science. I think we could actually have a guarantee with a little bit of philosophy. We've got it. The threats are all kind of mistaken. And a lot of times it's just because, we'll see it. I think we definitely have free will. Thought doesn't mean we're all fully free. And again, just for you all to think about this a little more, I think things can take away your freedom. And again, I'm not trying to give you guys too hard of a time, but something to think about. I think if you're sitting in a college classroom and you're only here because your parents wanted you to be, that does take away some of your freedom. Not all of it, but it does take away some. Does that mean you can't find your own motivation? It does not mean that. But I also think that if fear overcomes you, and you're never able to really participate in class, not trying to make you feel bad out of fear, I think that does take away some of your freedom. I think things like depression and anxiety take away your freedom. I think this whole culture we have that makes people ashamed of having emotions and an inner world and being ashamed of your suffering so you can't acknowledge it. Oh, I think those are massive chains being put on all of us. I don't think it's physics that robs us of freedom at the end of the day. I think it's our fear and our shame that does it. And I think even if you don't believe in free will, the people who actually spend some good time with the therapist and start overcoming some of that shit, they say it just transforms your whole way of dealing with reality. You just feel so much lighter, happier, more joyful. Everything just seems more engaging, more satisfying. I think that's the type of freedom that a lot of us are missing out on, that we don't talk about in philosophy class or really in college. I think that sucks. And at the end of the day, I'm more concerned about actually trying to get you to go do that. But for that, you need a good therapist. And by the way, shouldn't take some. My own therapist friend